The Uninvited was released on January 30, 2009, and was directed by Charles Gard and Thomas Gard. The film is an American remake of a South Korean movie and blends psychological tension with supernatural elements. The story follows a young woman named Anna who returns home after spending time in a psychiatric institution following her mother's tragic death. As she reconnects with her sister and begins to suspect their father's new girlfriend of dark intentions, unsettling visions and fragmented memories start to surface. Anna becomes convinced that something sinister is happening in the house, but as events unfold, the line between reality and delusion begins to blur. The film builds toward a twist that recontextualizes everything Anna has experienced, revealing the truth behind her trauma and forcing the audience to question what was real all along. Pet Sematary was released on April 21, 1989, and was directed by Mary Lambert, based on the novel by Stephen King. The story centers on Louis Creed, a doctor who moves with his family to a rural home near a mysterious burial ground hidden deep in the woods. After a tragic accident claims the life of a loved one, Louis learns that the nearby pet cemetery has the power to bring the dead back to life, but at a terrible cost. As grief and desperation overtake him, he makes a fateful decision to use the burial ground's power, leading to horrifying consequences. The film explores themes of loss, denial, and the dangerous human desire to undo death, ultimately showing that some boundaries should never be crossed, no matter how painful reality may be. Barbarian was released on September 9, 2022, and was written and directed by Zach Kreger. The story begins with a young woman named Tess who arrives at a rental house in a rundown neighborhood, only to discover that it has been double-booked and is already occupied by a stranger. Although she hesitantly decides to stay the night, uneasy feelings quickly take hold as strange noises and hidden spaces within the house suggest something is deeply wrong. As the narrative unfolds, the film shifts perspectives and gradually reveals a much darker history tied to the property, involving long-buried crimes and a monstrous presence living beneath the house. What starts as an awkward social situation transforms into a tense and unpredictable descent into terror, where survival depends on confronting horrors both human and inhuman. It Follows was released on March 13, 2015 in the United States, and was written and directed by David Robert Mitchell. The film follows a teenager named Jay who becomes the target of a mysterious supernatural entity after a seemingly innocent romantic encounter. The curse is passed through intimate contact, and the entity takes the form of different people, slowly but relentlessly walking toward its victim. Only those who have inherited the curse can see it, and the only way to delay death is to pass it on to someone else. As Jay and her friends try to understand the rules governing the entity, paranoia and dread intensify, since the threat can appear as anyone and never stops pursuing. The film builds a constant sense of unease, exploring themes of vulnerability, intimacy, and the inevitability of consequences. The Hills Have Eyes was released on March 10, 2006, and was directed by Alexander Aja. This film is a remake of the 1977 original and follows the Carter family as they travel through a remote desert area and become stranded after their vehicle breaks down. Unbeknownst to them, the region is inhabited by a group of mutated cannibals who have adapted to the harsh environment after years of isolation and exposure to nuclear testing. As the family is hunted and attacked, their struggle for survival grows increasingly brutal, forcing them to fight back in ways they never imagined. The film explores how ordinary people can be pushed to extreme violence when faced with unimaginable danger, turning a simple road trip into a relentless and savage fight to stay alive. Oculus was released on April 11, 2014 in the United States, and was written and directed by Mike Flanagan. The film follows siblings Kaylee and Tim, who reunite years after a traumatic childhood incident involving the brutal deaths of their parents. Tim has just been released from a psychiatric facility, while Kaylee is determined to prove that an antique mirror in their former home is responsible for the tragedy. As they set up cameras and experiments to document the mirror's supernatural influence, reality begins to warp around them. The mirror manipulates their perceptions, causing hallucinations and distortions of time that make it impossible to trust what they are seeing or remembering. As the siblings try to hold onto the truth, they are drawn deeper into the mirror's psychological trap, leading to a devastating conclusion that echoes the horrors of their past. Talk to Me was released on July 28, 2023 in Australia, and was directed by Danny Philippou and Michael Philippou. The story centers on a group of teenagers who discover a mysterious embalmed hand that allows them to communicate with spirits. By performing a ritual and holding the hand, they can temporarily become possessed, turning the experience into a thrill-seeking game. One girl, Mia, becomes increasingly drawn to the ritual as she struggles with grief over her mother's death. What begins as a reckless form of entertainment quickly spirals out of control when the boundary between the living and the dead begins to break down. As the possessions grow more dangerous and unpredictable, Mia's connection to the spirits deepens, leading to horrifying consequences that blur the line between reality, loss, and the afterlife. The Blair Witch Project was released on July 30, 1999, and was directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanche. The film is presented as found footage shot by 3 student filmmakers who travel into the woods of Maryland to document a local legend known as the Blair Witch. As they venture deeper into the forest, strange occurrences begin to unsettle them, including eerie noises at night and mysterious symbols appearing around their campsite. Their situation becomes increasingly desperate as they lose their way and tensions rise between them. The sense of isolation and fear grows steadily, with the characters unable to escape the woods or understand what is stalking them. The film builds its horror through realism and ambiguity, culminating in a disturbing ending that leaves their fate implied rather than fully shown. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released on October 11, 1974, and was directed by Tobe Hooper. The story follows a group of young friends traveling through rural Texas who encounter a family of violent cannibals living in isolation. After stopping near an abandoned house, they begin to disappear one by one as they fall victim to the family's brutal methods. The most infamous member of the group is a masked killer known as Leatherface, who wields a chainsaw and uses human skin to create his masks. As the remaining survivor tries to escape, the film becomes an intense and chaotic struggle for survival. Known for its raw and unsettling atmosphere, the story explores themes of madness, decay, and the breakdown of societal norms, leaving a lasting impact through its relentless sense of terror. It was released on September 8, 2017, and was directed by Andy Muschietti, based on the novel by Stephen King. The story takes place in the town of Derry, where a group of children known as the Losers Club are brought together by a series of terrifying encounters with a shape-shifting entity that often appears as a clown called Pennywise. As the children face their deepest fears, they begin to uncover the dark history of the town and realize that the creature has been preying on children for generations. Each member of the group must confront personal trauma while relying on their friendship to survive. The film blends coming-of-age elements with horror, building toward a confrontation where courage and unity become their only defense against an ancient evil. Poltergeist was released on June 4, 1982, and was directed by Tobe Hooper, with significant creative input from Steven Spielberg. The film follows the Freeling family, whose suburban home becomes plagued by increasingly aggressive supernatural disturbances. What begins with small, strange events soon escalates into violent paranormal activity, centering on their young daughter Carol Ann, who becomes the focus of the spirit's attention. When she is mysteriously taken into another dimension through a portal in the house, her family seeks help from paranormal investigators to bring her back. As they uncover the cause of the haunting, they learn that their home was built on a disturbed burial site, fueling the spirit's anger. The film combines emotional stakes with escalating terror, exploring themes of family, loss, and the unseen forces that can invade ordinary life. Smile was released on September 30, 2022, and was written and directed by Parker Finn. The story follows Dr. Rose Cotter, a psychiatrist who witnesses a disturbing incident involving a patient who claims to be haunted by an unseen presence. After the encounter, Rose begins to experience increasingly terrifying visions of people smiling in unnatural and menacing ways. As the phenomenon spreads into her own life, she realizes that the entity attaches itself to individuals through traumatic experiences and continues a chain of psychological torment. Desperate to understand what is happening, Rose investigates the pattern behind the curse, uncovering a cycle of violence and fear that feeds the entity. As her grip on reality weakens, the film explores how trauma can manifest as something inescapable, building toward a bleak and unsettling conclusion. Event Horizon was released on August 15, 1997, and was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. Set in the future, the story follows a rescue crew sent to investigate a spaceship called the Event Horizon, which mysteriously disappeared years earlier and has suddenly reappeared near Neptune. Led by Captain Miller and accompanied by the ship's creator, Dr. Weir, the crew boards the vessel and quickly discovers signs of a horrific fate that befell its previous occupants. The ship was designed to travel faster than light by creating a gateway through another dimension, but that dimension turns out to be something far more sinister. As the crew experiences disturbing visions and psychological breakdowns, it becomes clear that the ship has brought back a malevolent force that preys on their fears and guilt. The film blends science fiction with supernatural horror, exploring themes of isolation, madness, and the consequences of venturing into unknown realms beyond human understanding. The Conjuring was released on July 19, 2013, and was directed by James Wan. The story follows real-life paranormal investigators Ede Warren and Lorraine Warren, as they are called to help a family terrorized by a dark presence in their secluded farmhouse. As the disturbances grow more violent and frightening, the Warrens uncover a history of witchcraft and malevolent forces tied to the property. The entity targets the mother of the family, pushing her toward possession, while the rest of the household struggles to survive the escalating haunting. Through their investigation, the Warrens confront one of the most dangerous cases of their careers, leading to a tense and frightening battle against a powerful supernatural force. The film emphasizes atmosphere and suspense, focusing on fear rooted in the home and the vulnerability of family life. Halloween was released on October 25, 1978, and was directed by John Carpenter. The story centers on Michael Myers, who as a child commits a shocking murder and is later institutionalized. Years later, he escapes and returns to his hometown of Haddonfield, where he begins stalking a group of teenagers on Halloween night. The primary target becomes Laurie Strode, a high school student who finds herself in a terrifying fight for survival. As Michael silently follows and watches his victims, the tension steadily builds, creating a sense of unavoidable danger. The film is known for its minimalist style, eerie music composed by Carpenter himself, and the portrayal of Michael as an almost unstoppable force, helping define the slasher genre and influencing countless horror films that followed. Paranormal Activity was released on October 16, 2007, and was written and directed by Oren Peli. The film follows a young couple, Katie and Micah, who begin experiencing strange disturbances in their home that suggest a supernatural presence. In an attempt to document what is happening, Micah sets up cameras throughout the house, capturing subtle but increasingly disturbing events that occur mostly at night. As the activity escalates from small noises to violent encounters, Katie reveals a history of being followed by an unseen entity since childhood. Their attempts to understand or control the situation only make things worse, as the presence grows more aggressive and begins to take control of their lives. The film builds tension through its minimalist, found footage style, creating a sense of realism and dread that leads to a chilling and inevitable outcome. The Descent was released on July 8, 2005 in the United Kingdom, and was written and directed by Neil Marshall. The story follows a group of women who embark on a spelunking expedition deep into an uncharted cave system in the Appalachian Mountains. What begins as an adventurous trip soon turns into a nightmare when a collapse traps them underground with no clear way out. As panic and tension rise, the group realizes they are not alone in the darkness, as they are hunted by a group of humanoid creatures adapted to life in the caves. The claustrophobic environment, combined with dwindling resources and growing mistrust among the group, pushes them to their limits. The film explores themes of survival, trauma, and the psychological strain of isolation, building an intense and relentless sense of fear as the characters fight to escape the darkness. The Grudge was released on October 22, 2004, and was directed by Takashi Shimizu. The film follows an American nurse living in Tokyo who becomes exposed to a deadly curse that originates from a house where a violent tragedy once occurred. The curse is born from intense rage and sorrow, and it spreads to anyone who enters the home, dooming them to a terrifying fate. As the nurse begins to investigate, she encounters disturbing visions of the victims, including a pale woman and a child whose presence signals the curse's reach. The story unfolds in a non-linear way, showing how different people are affected as the curse passes from one victim to another. The film emphasizes the inevitability of the haunting, portraying a force that cannot be stopped or escaped once it takes hold. The Ring was released on October 18, 2002, and was directed by Gore Verbinski. The story centers on a journalist named Rachel who investigates a mysterious videotape rumored to cause the death of anyone who watches it exactly 7 days later. After viewing the tape herself, she begins a desperate search to uncover its origin and find a way to break the curse before her time runs out. Her investigation leads her to the tragic story of Samara Morgan, a girl with a disturbing past and supernatural abilities. As Rachel pieces together the truth, she realizes that simply understanding the curse may not be enough to stop it. The film builds a sense of dread through its eerie imagery and slow, unraveling mystery, culminating in a chilling realization about how the curse continues to spread. REC was released on November 23, 2007, and was directed by John Ballegro and Paco Plaza. The story follows a television reporter named Angela and her cameraman as they accompany a group of firefighters responding to an emergency call at an apartment building in Barcelona. What begins as a routine assignment quickly turns into a nightmare when the building is suddenly quarantined by authorities after a mysterious and violent outbreak spreads among the residents. Trapped inside, Angela continues filming as the situation spirals into chaos, documenting the terrifying transformation of those infected and the growing panic among the survivors. As they search for answers, they uncover hints about the origin of the infection, leading to a disturbing revelation that blends disease with something more sinister. The film's found footage style creates an intense sense of immediacy, placing the viewer directly inside the escalating horror. Suspiria was released on February 1, 1977 in Italy, and was directed by Dario Argento. The film follows a young American ballet student named Susie who travels to a prestigious dance academy in Germany. Soon after arriving, she begins to notice strange and unsettling events within the school, including mysterious disappearances and violent deaths among the students. As Susie investigates further, she uncovers a hidden world beneath the academy, revealing that it is secretly run by a coven of witches. The deeper she goes, the more dangerous the situation becomes, as she realizes she may be the next target. Known for its vivid colors, haunting music, and dreamlike atmosphere, the film blends supernatural horror with surreal visuals, creating a uniquely intense and unsettling experience that builds toward a dark and nightmarish climax. The Thing was released on June 25, 1982, and was directed by John Carpenter. The story takes place at a remote Antarctic research station, where a group of scientists and crew members encounter a deadly alien organism that can perfectly imitate any living being it absorbs. After a nearby Norwegian station is destroyed under mysterious circumstances, the American team takes in a sled dog that turns out to be the source of the infection. As paranoia spreads, the crew realizes that anyone among them could already be replaced by the creature. Isolated by the harsh environment and unable to trust each other, they attempt to identify and stop the thing before it escapes. The film builds intense psychological tension through isolation, mistrust, and body horror, as the creature reveals increasingly disturbing forms as it is discovered. Insidious was released on April 1, 2011, and was directed by James Wan. The story follows the Lambert family, whose young son Dalton falls into a mysterious coma after an unexplained incident in their home. Soon after, the family begins experiencing strange and terrifying supernatural events, suggesting that something is not only haunting their house, but has also attached itself to Dalton's spirit. It is revealed that Dalton has the ability to project his consciousness into a dangerous realm known as the Further, where lost souls and malevolent entities reside. As the haunting intensifies, the family seeks help from paranormal investigators to save him before he becomes permanently trapped. The film explores themes of astral projection, possession, and unseen dimensions, building a growing sense of dread as the boundary between the living world and the spirit realm begins to collapse. The Shining was released on May 23, 1980, and was directed by Stanley Kubrick, based on the novel by Stephen King. The story follows Jack Torrance, a struggling writer who takes a job as the winter caretaker of the isolated Overlook Hotel, bringing his wife Wendy and young son Danny with him. As the hotel becomes cut off by heavy snow, Jack's mental state begins to deteriorate under the influence of the building's dark history and supernatural forces. Danny, who has psychic abilities known as the Shining, experiences terrifying visions of the hotel's past violence and understands that something evil is growing stronger inside it. As isolation and paranoia intensify, Jack becomes increasingly unstable and dangerous toward his family. The film slowly transforms a story of isolation into a descent into madness, using atmosphere and repetition to build a sense of inescapable psychological collapse. Sinister was released on October 12, 2012, and was directed by Scott Derrickson. The story follows true crime writer Ellison Oswalt, who moves his family into a house where a brutal murder took place in hopes of researching his next book. While exploring the attic, he discovers a box of home movies depicting a series of disturbing family killings that appear to be connected. As Ellison investigates further, he realizes that each case is linked by a mysterious pagan-like entity that appears through the recordings. The more he watches, the more his own family becomes endangered, as the presence seems to attach itself to those who view the footage. The film builds tension through its found footage sequences and the slow realization that curiosity itself is part of the curse, leading to a grim and unsettling conclusion. Hereditary was released on June 8, 2018, and was written and directed by Ari Aster. The story follows the Graham family after the death of their secretive grandmother, whose passing triggers a series of increasingly disturbing and tragic events. The family begins to experience unsettling supernatural occurrences, particularly centered around the daughter, Charlie, and her older brother, Peter. As grief and tension build within the household, the mother, Annie, uncovers hidden secrets about her family's past that suggest they may be part of something far more sinister. The horror gradually shifts from psychological distress to supernatural inevitability, revealing that the family has been manipulated by a cult seeking to bring a powerful entity into the world. The film explores grief, trauma, and inherited suffering, building toward a shocking and inevitable collapse of the family's reality. Ju-on. The Grudge was released on January 2002 in Japan and was directed by Takashi Shimizu. The story is structured as a series of interconnected episodes showing how a deadly curse spreads after a violent tragedy occurs in a house where intense rage and suffering linger. Anyone who enters the home or comes into contact with someone affected by it becomes the next victim, with no clear way to escape its reach. The curse manifests through disturbing apparitions, including a ghostly woman and a child, who appear suddenly and signal inevitable death. As different characters encounter the house or its influence, their stories overlap to show how the curse perpetuates itself like an infection. The film focuses on inevitability and helplessness, presenting horror as something that cannot be reasoned with or stopped once it begins. Ringu was released on January 30, 1998 in Japan, and was directed by Hideo Nakata. The story follows journalist Ryuko Asakawa, who investigates a mysterious videotape that causes anyone who watches it to die exactly 7 days later. After her niece dies under strange circumstances, she watches the tape herself and begins a desperate investigation to uncover its origin. Her search leads her to the tragic story of a girl named Sadako, whose supernatural abilities and violent death are tied to the curse. Ryuko discovers that the tape itself is the source of the spreading horror, and that understanding it may not be enough to stop it. The film builds tension through its restrained style and eerie imagery, focusing on inevitability and the fear of unseen consequences. The Exorcist was released on December 26, 1973, and was directed by William Friedkin, based on the novel by William Peter Blatty. The story follows a young girl named Regan MacNeil, who begins to exhibit increasingly violent and inexplicable behavior after using a Ouija board. Her mother, desperate for answers, seeks medical help, but eventually turns to the Catholic Church when science cannot explain her condition. Two priests, Father Karras and Father Marin, are brought in to perform an exorcism, confronting a powerful demonic entity that has possessed Regan. As the ritual intensifies, the priests struggle physically and spiritually against the force, which manipulates fear and faith itself. The film explores themes of belief, evil, and the limits of human control in the face of something truly malevolent, building toward one of the most iconic and disturbing confrontations in horror history. Nori. The Curse was released on August 27, 2005, and was directed by Koji Shiraishi. The story is presented as a documentary made by a paranormal investigator who was researching a series of increasingly strange and connected supernatural events. As he follows different cases, he uncovers links between missing persons, psychic phenomena, and an ancient ritual tied to a mysterious entity known as Kagutaba. The investigation gradually reveals that these incidents are not isolated, but part of a larger curse that has already begun to affect everyone involved. As the filmmaker digs deeper, he becomes part of the story himself, and the boundaries between observation and participation begin to disappear. The film builds its horror through a layered narrative and found footage style, slowly assembling a larger, disturbing picture of inevitability and unseen influence. A Tale of Two Sisters was released on June 13, 2003 in South Korea, and was directed by Kim Ji-woon. The story follows two sisters, Soo-mai and Soo-yeon, who return home after a stay in a psychiatric institution and begin living with their father and their new stepmother in a secluded countryside house. Tension quickly builds between the sisters and their stepmother, who appears cold and controlling, while strange and unsettling events begin to occur throughout the home. Soo-mai struggles with traumatic memories and fragmented perceptions of reality, making it difficult to distinguish what is real from what is imagined. As the story unfolds, hidden truths about the family's past are revealed, reshaping everything the viewer has been led to believe. The film combines psychological horror with emotional tragedy, focusing on grief, repression, and fractured identity. Pulse was released on February 3, 2001 in Japan, and was directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. The story follows a group of young people in Tokyo who begin encountering strange phenomena after discovering a mysterious website that appears to connect the living with the dead. As more people become affected, they start disappearing or behaving as if they are being erased from reality itself. At the same time, technology and isolation seem to be accelerating the spread of a quiet, ghostly presence throughout the city. The film presents a world where spirits do not haunt in traditional ways, but instead seep into everyday life through digital connections and urban loneliness. As society gradually breaks down, the characters confront an overwhelming sense of emptiness and disappearance, making the horror feel both metaphysical and deeply existential. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and let me know if I should make more Iceberg videos, and also consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot. Thanks for watching.